Welcome to Uncopyable Women in Sales. If you're looking for actionable insights and real-world tools to turbocharge your sales starting tomorrow, well, you're in the right place. Your host, Kay Miller, earned the affectionate nickname Muffler Mama when she sold more automotive mufflers than anyone else in the world. In this podcast, Kay will talk to another superstar woman in sales as they reveal uncopyable strategies you can use to rack up more leads, snag dream clients, and take your sales numbers through the roof. Stay tuned and get ready to make more sales. And how about this? More money.
I have really been looking forward to today's guest, Jayne Fairley. Jayne is a national sales manager at Tiffin Motorhomes and has a history of working in the consumer goods industry. Jayne's skills include sales, negotiation, retail, team building, and account management. Jayne, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much. It's great to be here.
Now, you were highly recommended by Joe Snyder, who's the dealer marketing and training manager for FCCC, which is kind of a mouthful. It's Freightliner Custom Chassis Corporation. And when I told him I was doing this podcast, he said, "You've got to talk to Jayne." So here we are, and I really appreciate you spending a little bit of time with me, and telling us about your story and, how you see sales and what your advice is, especially to other women. So I would love to have you, first of all, tell us a little bit about Tiffin Motorhomes. And I know it's not your run-of-the-mill motorhomes. These are luxury RVs. So why don't you tell us about Tiffin?
Right. Yeah. So Tiffin Motorhomes is a company that actually started back in 1972 in Red Bank, Alabama. And it was started by Bob Tiffin, who actually, even to this day, at 81 years young, is still at the helm of our company. He comes in every day of the week for the 6 a.m. production meeting. He is there to talk to our customers. It is a family-run company. And I'm just super proud to be part of it. I actually joined the company coming up on 4 years ago now. My career in the RV industry has been almost 30 years, actually. But for the last 4, I've been with Tiffin Motorhomes. And I'll tell you, it's interesting. Very few people actually really, start their career and saying, I want to be a salesperson, right? A lot of us fall into that somehow. And from the moment that I started in the RV industry, I was lucky to start with a company that was a really reputable company. That was one of the biggest companies at the time, called Fleetwood RV. I started my career back in 1993. And, shortly thereafter, I always said to myself, if there was a company that I would ever want to go work for outside of this company, it would be Tiffin Motorhomes. And so about 5 years ago now, I had that opportunity kind of come to me. I am in a very, very small industry. It's a small industry, but it's a really great industry. And so we build motorhomes. And so in that industry, being so small as it is, when you're ready to make a move and you want to stay within that industry, you kind of have to keep things close to the vest. And so through the relationships that I've built over the years, I was able to talk to somebody who's also a woman, one of the few women back at that time who controlled the inventory for one of the largest RV dealerships in the country. And to this day, she is still my mentor. But I called her and I said, "Hey, I'm thinking of making a move." And she said, "Who do you need me to call?" And the first person she called, was fortunate enough that it was, I said, I want to go work for Tiffin. And so she called that person and they called me back. And that's where my story with Tiffin began. So, but Tiffin is a great company. We do, many different motorhomes. We do Class A motorhomes and Class Super C, which is what I'm head of as national sales manager. And, a lot of those products are going to start out in the MSRP price range of about $250,000 on up. Our most expensive model that we make, our most luxurious model, is going to MSRP for right around $850,000 to $900,000. So that's the team that I'm head of. But Tiffin Motor Homes has been known as one of the premier manufacturers in the RV industry, mostly because of how they take care of their customers after the sale. So that's a little bit about our company.
I love it. And yeah, the price range alone tells you that this isn't for these products aren't for everyone. And I know that my husband, Steve, talked to your group and talked about Moose being your target market. So you definitely have a specific market that you're going after.
Yes.
I love the fact, and I noticed when you sent me a little information about you, that you never really, your goal wasn't to be in sales. It kind of happened. And you are so right that this is how a lot of people get into sales. We don't really set out to be in sales, but everything is sales in a way, right?
That's right.
And you said in the early days, it was a very male dominated industry. And I'm assuming it still is for the most part. Is that true?
It is, but it's really expanding, which I'm happy to say. But when I started way back in the 1900s, by the way, I was
the 1900s.
So I graduated from Penn State University. I grew up in central Pennsylvania, and I graduated from Penn State back in May of 1993. And I grew up, I'm an only child. I grew up with my dad actually owned a snowmobile shop. So from the time I was a little tiny kid at 6 and 7 years old, I was out in the shop running the cash register and talking to customers. So he had me in front of people from a very early age. I just didn't realize it. I just did what I did. So I went to college, and I actually started as a journalism major because I thought that that's the route that I wanted to take. And it didn't take me long. I took my first speech class my freshman year of college, and I thought, I really like getting up in front of people and talking when I know what I'm talking about. And that got me pretty fired up. So I went to my advisor and I talked about some different things. And he actually recommended speech communication. And so that's what my degree is in. I have a BA in speech communication. And the other thing is, I had a very not a very wealthy upbringing at all. It was kind of week to week for the paychecks. And so I knew, when I was in college, I knew I had to graduate in 4 years. And I knew as soon as I graduated, I needed to get a job. And so I didn't know what that meant necessarily with speech communication. But so I went and did some interviews in my senior year, and a local company hired me to be a sales coordinator.
And what I wanted to ask you, what do you mean by sales coordinator? Because that's not a salesperson.
Yeah. So I was an in-house support for our outside sales reps who would go out and talk to builders and things like that, because it was for a manufactured housing company. And I lasted there about 5 months. I absolutely hated it. I thought, I am never doing anything in sales again. I'm not going to do it. And then back in the old days, way back then, we actually, how we found out about jobs was looking in the newspaper, right?
I remember that. I remember those days.
So I had my individually typed up resumes. And I had a local company that was looking for a sales coordinator in the RV industry. And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to start sending out some resumes. And they called me back, and it actually took me 3 interviews to get.
That's pretty intense, right? That's pretty intense. 3 interviews. By the 3rd interview, you're really wondering, what?
I'm like, yeah, do I really have what it takes to do this? But fortunately enough, I got into that company, and it was totally different from the other company that I had worked for. They had a training program, which was super important. So I had some consistency, but I did the same thing, right? So I was actually in-house, and I helped the guys who were the outside sales reps. So when they would travel back in those days, there were no cell phones. They had pagers. So, when they would travel, their other dealers would call me as the contact person. And so I would help them, whereas their rep couldn't while he was out traveling. And I say he because all of our reps were men.
At that time, we're men.
And yes, and I was the only people in our sales department that were female was myself and our 2 invoicing secretaries. That was it.
Well, good for you, because that takes some balls, so to speak, to be one of only a couple women in a company like that. So
it's interesting over my 30-year career. Every company, because I'd worked for 4 different RV companies. Every company that I've worked for, I've been the only female rep. Yeah.
Wow. That is, like I said, not maybe that surprising, but we need to change that. And that's one of the goals of this podcast, is to empower women and to show other women that this can be done. And you sound like you've had a great career. So you were still a sales coordinator. So how did you transition then into sales?
So how I transitioned was when it came time, and I did a couple of different things. From there, they gave me a few accounts after a couple of years, and I serviced those accounts, did really well doing that. So then they offered me a position as a product trainer, which I found to be like my forte. That's probably the best part of my job, is I love to do product training. I love to walk into a dealership. And, I've had situations where I remember when I was just starting out, I'm like 28, 29 years old. I walked into this RV dealership in Missouri, and there was this just crotchety old man. You looked at him and you're like, oh, this is going to be a fun day, right? I had to do this training session in front of 25 all men salespeople. And this guy's just at the back of the room, sitting there like this with his arms crossed. And you just know, he's like, this girl is not going to teach me anything I don't know, right?
Yes, so very skeptical.
Yes. So I do my sales presentation, and I get to the end, and he walks up to me after the fact, and I'm like, oh no, what's this guy going to say to me? And he walks up, and the smile comes on his face, and he says, I just want to let you know that I've been doing this a lot of years, and I learned more from you today than I've learned from anybody else that I can ever say. Coming to do training with us. And that, for me, I was like, wow, don't judge a book by its cover.
Right. And what a confidence builder.
Yeah.
And, you said that you graduated in communications and you really loved that. So you had the proclivity for that, but it still must have been a little bit scary to do that, I'm guessing.
Oh, 100%. When I first started in the industry, I had never flown on an airplane before.
You were just a baby.
Yeah. So the first time I ever had to go to an RV show was in January of 1994. And I am at the airport, and it's snowing, and I'm like, this is my first trip I'm ever taking on my own on a plane. And so there were a lot of intimidating times out there. But, here for me, I just, I try to, I'm just really humble. I'm down to earth. I'm very, I don't like to brag. I don't like to boast. But the thing is your attitude is everything. And I try to keep things as simple as possible. I'm not a spreadsheet person. I just like to make relationships with people. And I love to have a transference of belief. And that's what sales is all about, right? It's a transference of your belief. And if you get excited about it, enthusiasm is contagious.
Today's podcast is sponsored by the acclaimed book, Uncopyable Sales Secrets, How to Create an Unfair Advantage and Outsell Your Competition by Kay Miller. Put the secrets in this book to work, and you'll make more sales, grow your network, and become a top earner. See the show notes or go to Amazon.com and search for Uncopyable Sales Secrets to order the book right now.
I agree with both of those. You can't really change someone's mind except if it's their idea, right? You have to change their perspective, and all the talking in the world isn't going to change their mind unless you like I said, make them or help them see things in a different light. And it sounds like you did. And I think it's interesting. I've had that experience too. I was the first woman hired in my industry, and it was kind of good news, bad news, because you had sort of an uncopyable advantage walking in, but then you had more pressure, I think, than the men would have to prove yourself.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you really did that. And not that you can totally stereotype women, but I think as women, sometimes we are more prepared and we are more, relationship oriented. And it sounds like that's exactly what you did.
Yeah. I've always told my bosses, and I said, listen, don't hire me for a job because I'm a woman. Hire me because I'm the best choice for this position. That's what I want. There are lots of people out there who they know products inside and out, but they just don't know how to make a relationship with somebody, right? They don't know how to ask the right questions. They can't ask for the sale, and it's those little things, like if you are the person that is the one who picks up their phone when somebody calls you and says, hey, I need help with this, which I always do. If I can, if I can't, I follow up right away. But you have to do the basics well. That's the thing. Just do the basics well.
And, I don't know if you had a chance to read my book, but yeah, a lot of it is this back to the basics. And it is surprising how many times you call someone back and they say, oh, thanks for calling me back.
Yeah.
Right. Just that alone sets you apart from a lot of salespeople. You must do a lot of other relationship oriented things. I'm assuming that you ask a lot of questions and really get to know them before you tell them what you're all about and give them the so-called pitch.
Yes. Yeah, I sure do. And that's the thing, when in doubt, ask them, why is this important to you? Why is it important to you? Get them talking, ask them, get their perspective on things. And that's how you we talked a little bit earlier about making it their idea.
Yes.
How we start to make it their idea when most people, when they say something and they put something out there, they don't just want a quick reply back, which is our tendency to do that. Yes, no, here's what we're going to do. But ask the question, right? Saying, why is that important to you? What's been done in the past, and start to really get to know what lies beneath the surface there.
Right. Understand their perspective and position. And you're right. I think a lot of salespeople, as basic as it sounds, just start off by talking instead of listening. And, like you said, you're a communicator. You love to stand up in front of a crowd and educate people. But when you're in sales, when you are in the sales relationship, it really is about listening and understanding. And that tells me a lot about why you're so successful. So you've risen to the top. So that speaks to your success too. And you said that your categories were, category A and triple C. So I was kind of curious because I looked that up, and A is the biggest or the best, and triple C is the next tier. And then B is the, I don't know, less expensive, whatever. How does that happen? A, then C, then B.
Oh, I don't
Who knows?
So I actually there's another category in there, and it's called Super C. And so that's what we build the Freightliner chassis on. It's kind of a combination between a Class A, but it has the sleeping capability and storage and drivability of a Class C. So that's why it's called a Super C. But we do have a C segment as well, which are the smaller ones, but mine's a pretty big BC 39 foot, 360 horsepower. It can tow 12,000 pounds on behind. So if you have a horse trailer or something like that, it's designed to be pretty rugged out there. So, but you know what? It's what I do. I love what I do. I mean, listen, we all have days. Yesterday was one of those days for me. I got to the end of the day and I'm like, man, I'm just overwhelmed. But you know what? You get a do-over every day, and that's what's beautiful. You go to bed at night, and you wake up the next morning, and you get a whole new perspective. And that's what I try to do. And this morning I woke up, I'm like, man, I got 4 conference calls today and I got this to get done. And it's a holiday weekend we're going into. But I absolutely love what I do because in my role as the national sales manager, and by the way, this is like, I am into day 30 now of being
brand new. Congratulations. If I can't remember if I said congratulations, but yeah, since August 1st.
So this is kind of interesting. So before I was national sales manager for my previous 3.5 years at Tiffin, I have been a regional sales manager. So I live in Florida, and I started out with Tiffin as doing a little tiny class C's for the Southeast United States. But about 1.5 years ago, they asked me to do all products. So I did all the products just for the state of Florida because the state of Florida represents the most RV registrations in the United States and also has our biggest dealers in the United States. So I did that for the last 3.5 years. And so now it's interesting to me, and this is what I was concerned about being a woman. Number one was when I was asked to do this role, 2 of the people that I am now in charge of, because I have 5 reps that now report to me. 2 of those 5, one of them used to be my boss at a former company that I worked at. And
interesting. So how's that working out?
Working out very, very well. Very well. And then the second one, I actually, when I was a product trainer back in my 20s, he was one of those outside sales reps that I actually worked with. So I kind of reported to him as well. So at first I was like, oh, how's this going to work out? But those 2 guys have been just instrumental in my transition because they are just so open and they're so excited that they have somebody in this role who can communicate, who's organized. And so it's actually been really, really good.
I think that's interesting because back in the day, I think sometimes women, we were our own worst enemies, and really props and kudos to the guys who are so supportive.
Absolutely.
And, really, once again, when you prove yourself to them, I think it's kind of nice for them to have a woman on the team, to have some diversity and not all look alike and not all be alike. So, I did want to clarify, because I asked you this before, you're mostly in B2B, right? You're selling to dealers, correct?
Right. Yes. We are the manufacturer, Tiffin Motorhomes. And then we have our dealers who are basically the stores that sell to the retail public. Now we do a little bit. So we sell to them and they sell to the end user. But we also do RV shows. So what we do in those cases is we go out and we support our dealers at one of their RV shows, and we're out there answering questions for customers. And a lot of times we are selling to the customer. We just can't write the final deal. So we pretty much get them to that point because a lot of times customers feel more comfortable opening up to us when we come to say, no, we can't sell you the coach, but we can pretty much tell you anything about it.
Right. The pressure's off, right? They don't feel like, yeah.
Exactly. Then you're like, well, at the end, then you ask for the sale. And when they say, well, yeah, then you go get a salesperson, a retail salesperson, and turn them over to them. And all they have to do, their job is then pretty easy. All they have to do is write a deal. But so we do have a lot of end user communication as well.
And support. I think you said, you go out sometimes and support the dealers, right? You've given a wealth of information, and we don't have that much more time. I told you 30 minutes. And so you've talked a lot about how you feel like you've succeeded and what have been the keys to success. But what advice, besides what you've already shared, or maybe just reiterate what you shared, would you recommend to other salespeople, especially women in sales?
Absolutely. So number one, I would say this: your attitude is everything, right? If you are excited about something, that's going to transfer to your end user, your customer. If you are down on something, or if you don't have that confidence in it, they're going to pick up on it. So enthusiasm is contagious is my biggest thing that I say to all my training sessions. And then the other thing that I would say too is just the basics, like we talked about, doing the basics really well, but also understanding that you are surrounded by teachers all around you. So if you just observe a little bit and you say, hey, look, that guy's successful or that lady's successful over there. And what works for them may not work for you, but you get these little tidbits from here, from over here, and you make it your own. And that's what makes you into who you become as a salesperson. So I think that's great. And then the other thing is, you know what, the hardest thing for women that we face, I think, is that, you know, we're the ones who can birth children out there, right? So a lot of ladies decide, I'm not going to go into sales because I can't be out traveling all the time, right? So for me, I've got to say, I have a wonderful husband who for these, we've been married for 24 years. We've been together for 32 years, but we've been married for 24 years. And he has just supported me. And I have a daughter. She's now 20, she's getting ready to turn 20 years old. But I did have to travel a lot through my career. And he's always been here. We decided early on that one of us was going to have to stay home. And so for a lot of years, he put his career on hold so he could stay home so I could go out and do what I needed to do. And now he's back in the workforce and he's doing that again. But just having a lot of that support has really personally helped me. But because I didn't have to give up being a mom, I could still be a mom and I could still do my job too and do it really, really well. And then the other last thing I would say is what you do is not just a job, it's your career. And you have to hone your skills every single day. So try to get better every single day. Try to learn something new. Never turn yourself off from learning because it will pay you off dividends in the end. For sure.
Right. And, you know, once you get out of school, you know, college, which for both of us was a long time ago, you really do have to be proactive in learning more and being informed. And you sound like you're basically a sponge for all kinds of information, including your customers. So that's huge. Becoming, you know, keeping yourself on top of your game. So you've talked about being a woman has presented some challenges. And would you say, it sounds like you would also say it's given you some advantages, right? Would you say that?
I would agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. You know, I wouldn't, one of the things, that our current, president of our company, when he asked me to take on this role, he said to me specifically, he's like, I want you because you're organized and you're a great communicator. And I feel that as a woman, I'm not saying every woman is a great communicator and is organized, nor is every man not those things. But for me, he just really seized upon that. So yeah, I mean, I think I've been given a little bit of advantages just because I personally have taken advantage of those things about being able to multitask and being able to be organized and be able to be the one that kind of nurtures and says, okay, this person really needs to know this. I'm a very detail-oriented person. And sometimes it takes me a little bit longer to do some things than other people can whip right through. But I like to be very detailed and concise. So yeah, it has.
Well, yeah. And things like, you know, the simple things like calling people back, it does take organization to do that. And it's fantastic to hear that, you know, that you have a team, that your husband was willing to make some sacrifices. And now, like you said, he's back into the workforce. I talked to one woman, and when she was applying for a job, the person interviewing her said, well, who's going to take care of the kids? And she was saying that you would never ask a man that, right? So you will figure it out. If you want to succeed in this field, you will figure out who's going to take care of the kids. And in this case, your wonderful husband. And so you have one daughter, you have an only child?
I do.
Yes, we do too.
And she's taking classes at our local community college. And I'm going to tell you, I tell her every day, I was like, you need to be in sales. Because she has a knack for just making relationships, and she would be very, very good at it. But she's, just like anyone. Oh, I don't know if I want to do sales. But
sales has such a bad rap.
I think the thing that set me up for sales the most was, all through college, I was a waitress. I loved being a waitress, because I was able to figure out pretty quickly, that you're rewarded pretty quickly on whether you do a good job or you do a bad job. And you figure out pretty quickly what works, what this customer really likes, what most customers really like, what they don't like. And so that really gives you some really good life skills, but also some really good selling skills out there as well.
I was actually also a waitress, and I agree. You get instant feedback, and it really is a joy to, especially when you're a waitress, server now, I think they would call us, or waiter, but to give something that makes them happy. And one thing I like to think of sales as helping people instead of selling people. You're helping them get what they want and what will really benefit them. Sometimes even if they don't know what that is, because you are finding out their needs and then you're educating them. You are the expert on your product, so that sounds like you have become the expert on them. So
absolutely. And when you are confident in your product knowledge, when you invest in yourself, that comes across in how you sell to other people, right? They pick up on that confidence and they feed on it.
Exactly. And knowing what you're talking about is so important. And I've got this nickname, Muffler Mama, and I don't know if you heard that story, but when I was selling automotive mufflers, I actually went into a muffler shop. I was selling through distribution, but I asked them to help me learn how to install a muffler and how to weld it and do all those things, because I wanted to see things from the customer's perspective. So I got a lot of credibility from that, but I also got a lot of knowledge. So definitely knowing what you're talking about is huge.
What is also important too is setting yourself apart from everybody else that's out there, from that sea of all those other salespeople. What are you going to do that makes people remember you? And so I have this quick little story. I was selling RVs. Oh my gosh, I was doing some training at a dealership in North Carolina, and it was in the wintertime, and it was it's been about 8 years ago now. And I thought, what can I do that's different? What's going to set me apart from everybody else? So I went to Walmart, in our motorhome at that time. I was doing a very high-end luxury motorhome, probably in about the $700,000 retail range. And I thought, you know what? I wonder how many salespeople actually know how to use an induction cooktop on an RV. So what I did was I went out and I fired it up, but I had stopped at Walmart and I bought an induction pan with a big jug of water and some hot cocoa mix. And what I did is I went in and I wanted to show them how quickly an induction cooktop can boil in water. That was the game plan, to make them feel more comfortable. And I had all these little marshmallows and things set up, little cocoa station. And that's how we started out the training session. And they had no idea, first of all, how quickly you could boil water on there. But ever since that day, they always, every time I would call or they would call me and they'd say, hey, you have some hot cocoa ready? I mean, they always remembered that. And there was nobody else that ever did anything like that. And so that stuck out in their minds. I bet today, even if I went back, they'd be like, well, it's hot cocoa.
Right.
That's perfect before.
And people, they say people buy from people they like, know, and trust, but also remember. And when you talk about being uncopyable and memorable, that's a great thing that you did. That was brilliant. So good for you. Good for you. We are going to wrap up this conversation. And again, I appreciate it so much. I think anyone listening or watching this is going to have a wealth of information from you. I encourage you to check out the Tiffin website, which is tiffinmotorhomes.com. And if you're in the market for one of these really high end, I mean, it's just fun to look at them, all the features that these things have. Wow, they're crazy. crazy good. And you said that you will put your email address out there if anyone wants to contact you. And Jayne, she's not a plain Jane, as she said. Her name is spelled Jayne. So if you email Jayne.Fairley, and Fairley is Fairley at tiffinmotorhomes.com, you can get a hold of Jayne. So thank you for being on the podcast and for all your wisdom. You've just been a fantastic guest, and I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me. And remember, girls rock out there. So let's get it done.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Uncopyable Women in Sales, your source for secrets you can use to make more sales. Check the show notes for links and contact information. And if you enjoyed the podcast, please spread the word by subscribing, sharing, and leaving a 5-star review. You can always learn more by going to uncopyablesales.com/podcast. Until next time, go out and supercharge your sales like a true uncopyable rock star.